December 11th, 1944. The Eagle's Nest, Adolf Hitler's Alpine retreat, was unusually quiet. The kind of silence that presses down on a man's chest. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt stood rigid against a concrete wall, hands raised, flanked by Field Marshal Walter Model and General Hasso Manteuffel. The three men, some of the most powerful commanders in Germany's Western Front, were being humiliated in the most primal way possible. The SS, those political enforcers who answered to Hitler alone, searched them like petty criminals. Sidearms were confiscated, briefcases torn open, pockets emptied. Every gesture scrutinized, every move judged. The air was thick with tension, a tension not born of battle but of stripped honor. These were men of the old Prussian aristocracy, steeped in a culture that valued courage and discipline above all else. And now, here they were, reduced to trembling under the gaze of men they considered political thugs. Inside the same bunker, Adolf Hitler trembled, not from fear, but from excitement. He unveiled what he called his masterstroke, Operation Watch on the Rhine, a plan that would become known to history as the Battle of the Bulge. 200,000 German soldiers, he declared, would cut through the Ardennes and seize the port of Antwerp. Victory, he insisted, was guaranteed. The Americans are cowboys, mere playboys, he said. At the first shot, they will panic. They will scatter just as they did at Kesselring Pass. Von Manteuffel said nothing. He had fought the Americans before. He knew they were no cowboys, and deep down, he already suspected Hitler was mistaken, but even he could not yet see the full scale of the error. For decades, we have been told a certain story about World War II. The German generals painted it in their post-war memoirs, claiming from the very start they had feared George Patton. They said they had tracked his every move, from the deserts of North Africa to the hedgerows of Normandy. They described him as a man who kept them awake at night, the singular threat who demanded constant attention. It is a compelling story, one that flattered the Americans and preserved German pride. But when historians finally accessed the original intelligence files from 1944, documents created when the bullets were still flying, the truth was far less dramatic. In February 1944, 4 months before D-Day, German intelligence meticulously prepared profiles on every senior Allied commander expected to lead the invasion. Dwight Eisenhower, Bernard Montgomery, Omar Bradley, all were carefully documented. Bradley's file was thorough, Montgomery's exhaustive. And Patton's file? It did not exist. There was no obsession, no fear, barely even a mention. Until August 1944, the German High Command simply ignored him. So how did the man they overlooked suddenly become the commander they claimed to fear the most? And if not Patton, who were the Germans really watching? The answers came from post-war interrogations conducted by American historians and the British military writer B.H. Liddell Hart. Captured German generals were questioned extensively, often revisiting the same points until patterns emerged. What they revealed was far more nuanced than the glorified story presented in memoirs. The Germans feared precision, speed, and unpredictability, not merely bravado. Mark Clark, commanding the Fifth Army in Italy, earned contempt. He was tall, photogenic, obsessed with his own image, always positioned for the perfect press photograph. Military success mattered, but glory mattered more. Kessler, who commanded German forces in Italy, observed Clark's vanity with barely concealed disdain. At Anzio in May 1944, Clark had a chance to trap the German 10th Army, annihilating an entire formation. But he chose the path that promised the most headlines, turning toward Rome instead. German soldiers, slipped away to fight another day, while American infantrymen paid with their lives in mud and blood. Clark was predictable, not through brilliance, but through self-interest. Montgomery, by contrast, was predictable in a different way. Commanding the British 21st Army Group, he had defeated Rommel in North Africa and was Britain's preeminent military hero. German officers could set their watches by him. Field Marshal Rundstedt described him as methodical, cautious, unyielding. Montgomery would never attack without overwhelming force, would stop at nightfall, would bombard for days. Gunther Blumentritt, his former chief of staff, demonstrated the routine by walking across the room in slow, deliberate steps, one foot in front of the other. Predictable movement, predictable strategy. It was a curse in its own way. Operation Market Garden, his one bold gamble, ended in catastrophe. 17,000 Allied casualties and the annihilation of the British 1st Airborne Division at Arnhem. The Germans noted the irony. When Montgomery tried to be bold, disaster struck. Yet not all British commanders were rigid. Harold Alexander, commanding the 15th Army Group in Italy, earned genuine respect. Where Montgomery demanded obedience, Alexander managed complexity. He commanded a multinational force: Americans, British, Free French, Poles, Indians, Brazilians, New Zealanders, all with different equipment, doctrines, and languages. Alexander kept them cohesive, flexible, and effective. Kesselring called him a gentleman, the highest compliment in wartime. Where Montgomery imposed a doctrine, Alexander adapted. Where Montgomery sought control, Alexander guided initiative. To German generals, Alexander was the British leader Montgomery could have been if only he had possessed humility. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, was viewed differently. He managed more military power than any general in history. Yet German officers did not see him as a battlefield genius. He was a coordinator, not a killer. While orchestrating the alliance across nations and theaters required intelligence and patience, Eisenhower's broad front strategy spread forces thin. He kept the alliance together, but never delivered a decisive blow. To the Germans, he was a politician on the battlefield, a man whose genius lay in logistics, diplomacy, and coalition management, but who lacked a killer instinct. Omar Bradley commanded over 1 million men in the 12th Army Group. German generals found him difficult to assess because he was understated. Bradley did not seek headlines like Clark, flamboyance like Patton, or obsessive caution like Montgomery. He simply commanded. Competent, methodical, professional. Bradley applied pressure relentlessly, never reckless, never hasty. Against him, German officers realized that the enemy's strength was not one man, but an industrialized army capable of relentless, overwhelming force. Bradley's genius lay not in brilliance, but in unyielding efficiency, a lesson the Germans would learn repeatedly. Courtney Hodges, commanding the First Army, was even less individually memorable. But his army embodied an unstoppable force. German generals fought them across Normandy, Aachen, and the Hurtgen Forest. Each time, American units could be replaced, reinforced, and resupplied. Against this machine, killing a general mattered little. Individual weaknesses were irrelevant. Facing Hodges' forces felt like facing an execution by artillery, a relentless, mechanical flood of soldiers, tanks, and firepower. And then there was Patton. Initially dismissed, underestimated, sidelined after the slapping scandal, he returned in August 1944 with the Third Army, breaking out of Normandy and advancing 400 miles in just 2 weeks. German maps, calculations, assumptions, obsolete within hours. Von Manteuffel received reports he could barely comprehend. Entire divisions moving faster than predicted. Tanks roaring through snow and fog, the enemy lines collapsing before his eyes. Patton had become a living nightmare for the German command. Bold, operational in vision, relentless in execution. Patton's brilliance lay not just in speed, but in audacity. He would not allow Germans to escape, unlike Clark. He operated at a scale German commanders struggled to track, striking with operational, not tactical, precision. Kesselring compared him to Guderian, Rommel, the masters of armored warfare. Patton transformed maneuver warfare into an art form, yet he was not alone. Lucien Truscott, commanding 6th Corps at Anzio in February 1944, never sought fame, but earned profound respect. Stagnant units became aggressive under him. His soldiers mastered the Truscott trot, moving faster than doctrine allowed, exploiting enemy gaps, striking unpredictably. Tactical excellence made him as dangerous as Patton, though he remained obscure in the public eye. In post-war interrogations, German generals listed him alongside Patton, not Montgomery, Bradley, or Clark, as a commander they genuinely feared. The German rankings were simple. Who kept them awake at night? Clark? Predictable? Vain? Montgomery? Predictable? Cautious? Eisenhower? Politically brilliant but strategically frustrating. Bradley? Efficient? Relentless. Hodges? A machine they could not stop. Alexander? Respected for flexibility and skill. Truscott? Feared for operational mastery. Patton? Feared for speed, boldness, and sheer audacity. The lesson was clear. Speed kills, aggression kills, predictability saves lives. Facing Patton or Truscott was terrifying. Facing the American industrial machine under Bradley was inexorable. German generals respected Alexander's professionalism, but feared the unstoppable force, the relentless pressure, and the audacious maneuvers. In the future of warfare, the old world of predictable generals and linear battles was gone. Brilliance, speed, and relentless efficiency defined survival. For viewers of WW2 Silent Valor, if this glimpse into the minds of the commanders has gripped you, hit that like button and subscribe. Every week, we dive into untold stories of courage, strategy, and audacity from World War II, stories that textbooks rarely tell. Stay tuned, because in Part 2, we will explore how Patton and Truscott's operational brilliance would continue to shatter German expectations and reshape the battlefield forever. By August 1944, the Third Army under General George S. Patton had become a force that German commanders could no longer ignore. Until then, German intelligence had largely discounted him, assuming that the man sidelined after the slapping scandal would remain ineffective. They had no detailed files, no constant updates, no obsession. But Normandy would change everything. Patton's army broke out of the hedgerows with a speed and coordination the Germans had never imagined. 400 miles in just 2 weeks. Entire German units were flanked, cut off, and obliterated before they could respond. Their maps, meticulously drawn and carefully updated, became useless overnight. The arithmetic of their planning failed spectacularly against the raw audacity of Patton's maneuvers. German commanders in the Ardennes, the West, and even in the intelligence bunkers were stunned. Von Manteuffel, who had fought Americans before and had a deep understanding of Allied tactics, could scarcely comprehend what the reports described. Entire divisions moved faster than expected. Tanks roared through snow and fog. Communications lines were severed, supply depots abandoned, and German field commanders left scrambling. For the first time, Patton was no longer an abstract concept in reports. He was a living nightmare, an unstoppable tidal wave of men, steel, and firepower. But Patton's genius was not just speed. It was audacity, combined with operational foresight, while other commanders, like Mark Clark or Bernard Montgomery, relied on predictability, publicity, or rigid caution. Patton saw the battlefield in terms of movement and momentum. He struck where the enemy felt safe. He exploited hesitation. He forced his adversaries to react rather than plan. Kesselring, a German commander who had fought both Rommel and Patton, compared the American general to Guderian, the father of armored warfare. Patton, he said, thinks in maneuvers, not just in battles. He sees the battlefield as a canvas, the divisions as brushes, and the enemy as color to be painted over. Yet Patton was not the only American commander to frighten the Germans. Lucien Truscott, though less famous, had already made a name for himself at Anzio earlier in the year. His 6th Corps had taken a stagnant beachhead and transformed it into a lethal, dynamic force. The German 10th Army had believed it contained the American landing, confident that time and attrition would sap morale. Truscott had other plans. Within days, previously passive American units were aggressive, probing enemy defenses, exploiting every weakness, and moving faster than doctrine allowed. The so-called Truscott Trot became legendary in the intelligence reports, a pace that broke men and shattered assumptions. The German assessment was clear. Speed and decisiveness were far more dangerous than individual brilliance or vanity. Clark, with his obsession for headlines, offered opportunities. Montgomery, with his caution, gave the Germans time. Eisenhower, with his broad front strategy, extended the war by 6 months. Bradley and Hodges applied relentless pressure, grinding the German front line into submission. Alexander earned respect for his diplomacy and tactical flexibility. Truscott, though unknown to the public, earned genuine fear. And Patton? He earned both respect and terror. The breakout from Normandy did more than destroy German divisions. It shattered the psychological equilibrium of the German high command. Officers who had once dismissed Patton as sidelined or reckless now found themselves recalculating every assumption. Reports arrived daily, each more alarming than the last. Infantry could not be redeployed fast enough. Supply lines were cut. Retreats became routes. In a matter of weeks, German planners realized that the man they had ignored was capable of operational decisions that outpaced their most optimistic projections. In December 1944, this reality was brutally confirmed during the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler had launched a surprise offensive through the Ardennes, hoping to break through to Antwerp. German planners calculated that American forces would need 2 weeks to respond. Patton responded in 48 hours. 3 divisions of the Third Army pivoted 90 degrees, marching through snow, ice, and fog, with a precision that German officers could barely comprehend. Von Manteuffel received the reports and could not believe his eyes. The calculations had been sound, but the reality was something else entirely. The Americans had moved faster than mathematics allowed. The roar of Sherman engines, thousands of them, cut through the silence where only expectation of delay should have existed. It was not just a military maneuver, it was psychological warfare. German officers were suddenly forced to confront the limitations of their planning, the human cost of underestimating speed, and the terrifying reality of American operational mobility. Patton's Third Army had become more than a unit. It was a symbol of unstoppable force, a living reminder that aggression and momentum were lethal weapons in their own right. Yet the Germans still struggled to interpret the nature of the threat. They had long believed that individual brilliance defined the battlefield, that tracking the movements of Patton or Clark was the key to survival. The intelligence files, interviews, and interrogation reports revealed a more complex truth. The Germans feared systems as much as men. The First Army under Hodges embodied relentless, impersonal power. Bradley's 12th Army Group was a well-oiled machine, sustained by industrial might and logistical supremacy. Patton and Truscott represented human embodiments of speed, adaptability, and initiative, traits that could not be predicted or calculated. German generals, forced to confront these realities, began to reevaluate their entire worldview. The old methods of anticipating enemy actions based on doctrine, routine, and ego were obsolete. Against Patton, Clark, and Truscott, traditional strategy failed. The Prussian principles of careful planning, methodical advancement, and predictable engagement were no longer sufficient. The battlefield had evolved. Velocity, initiative, and unrelenting operational pressure had become the ultimate currency of survival. Patton's impact extended beyond tactical victories. He forced a cultural reckoning among the key Germans, demonstrating that assumptions about enemy behavior could be catastrophic. Officers who once prided themselves on precision and foresight found themselves blindsided by audacity and relentless execution. Morale, planning, and doctrine were tested in ways that numbers alone could not measure. Patton was not merely a general. He was a paradigm shift, a force that redefined what it meant to fight in a modern war. Truscott's achievements, though less publicized, echoed the same principle. His ability to turn stagnant units into a cohesive, fast-moving force revealed that leadership could amplify industrial and numerical advantage. Speed, decisiveness, and tactical intuition could reshape the battlefield faster than any traditional plan. To the German commanders, Truscott and Patton represented the new reality. Wars would no longer be fought by individuals, but by dynamic systems capable of outpacing and outthinking traditional methods. By the end of 1944, the German High Command had been forced to update its evaluations. Patton, once ignored, was now described as the best by officers who had studied his campaigns. Truscott was added to the list of commanders who genuinely terrified them. Bradley, Hodges, and Alexander earned respect for their professionalism and system-oriented efficiency. Montgomery remained respected, but predictable. Clark was the most easily exploitable, yet still dangerous through vanity. Eisenhower was acknowledged for managing the coalition, but his lack of aggressiveness was criticized. For viewers on WW2 Silent Valor, this is where history becomes truly fascinating. The story is not just about victories or defeats. It's about perception, adaptation, and fear. It's about how German generals, trained to respect discipline and precision, were forced to confront forces they could not predict. Patton's audacity, Truscott's initiative, Bradley's relentless management, and the unstoppable machine of Hodges's First Army combined to redefine warfare itself. If this deep dive into the mindset of German commanders is gripping you, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications for WWII Silent Valor. Every week, we explore untold stories of strategy, audacity, and battlefield genius, revealing what the textbooks often overlook. In the next segment, Part 3, we will follow Patton and Truscott as they drive into the heart of Germany's defenses, confronting the final stages of the Battle of the Bulge and cementing their legacy as the commanders German generals both feared and respected. The key lesson is clear. War is not won by individuals alone. It is won by speed, decisiveness, and the ability to turn opportunity into unstoppable momentum. Patton and Truscott demonstrated that brilliance can take many forms: audacity, adaptability, and relentless execution. But the Germans feared what they could neither predict nor control. And that fear, as much as any tactical mistake, shaped the outcome of the war. Even as snow fell across the Ardennes, German officers realized that the future of warfare had arrived. No longer could they rely solely on Prussian discipline, careful calculation, or experience in past conflicts. The Americans had shown that industrial power, relentless pressure, and operational genius could create a battlefield reality that defied assumptions. For the German commanders in those cold, dark bunkers, it was a lesson in humility, terror, and inevitability. As December 1944 deepened into winter, the Ardennes became a frozen crucible. Hitler's plan, Operation Watch on the Rhine, promised a swift, decisive blow. 200,000 German soldiers would smash through the Allied lines and capture Antwerp. The German High Command believed the Americans would panic, retreat, and crumble under pressure. They had underestimated the reality of Allied coordination, the relentlessness of the First Army, and, above all, the speed and audacity of Patton's Third Army. When the reports reached the German bunkers, disbelief turned into panic. Patton's forces, already a legend, pivoted 90 degrees with breathtaking speed, striking into the flank of the advancing German columns. Von Manteuffel, who had fought the Americans and respected their tactical ability, could not comprehend the numbers. 3 divisions moved as if time itself had been rewritten. Roads clogged with snow and ice did not stop them. Bridges, blown up or frozen, were bypassed or repaired on the move. Every hour of delay the Germans had counted on disappeared in 48 hours. The very fabric of their planning unraveled before their eyes. To the German generals, this was more than a military threat. It was a psychological assault. They had been trained to anticipate enemy moves, to prepare, to exploit weakness. But the Americans under Patton and Truscott were no longer predictable. Entire divisions moved faster than anyone could calculate. Tactical doctrines failed. Communications, meticulously established, were disrupted. The enemy did not just react, it dictated the tempo. The Third Army had become an unstoppable force, a tidal wave of armored power and relentless infantry that left chaos in its wake. Patton's genius lay in combining speed with operational insight. Unlike Mark Clark, who chased glory and allowed enemy units to escape, or Montgomery, who carefully weighed every risk, Patton saw the battlefield as a dynamic system. He understood the power of maneuver, the psychological impact of audacity, and the operational advantage of momentum. To German commanders, this was terrifying. Their meticulous calculations, once reliable, became meaningless. Each report of Patton's advance brought confusion, despair, and fear. Lucien Truscott, too, continued to strike fear in the Germans. At Anzio, he had demonstrated that speed, initiative, and discipline could overcome stagnation. In the Ardennes, his methods echoed Patton's audacity on a smaller scale. Units moved faster than doctrine dictated, probing enemy lines, exploiting weaknesses, and forcing German commanders to react rather than lead. The Truscott Trot, as it became known, was a rhythm of war that broke both men and morale. Where Patton was the storm, Truscott was the sharp edge, precise and lethal, complementing the massive pressure of the Third Army. German officers began to realize a brutal truth. Individual genius mattered less than adaptability and operational momentum. Bradley's 12th Army Group demonstrated the relentless grind of industrial warfare. Hodge's 1st Army embodied impersonal power, a mechanized force that replaced losses faster than the Germans could inflict them. Alexander's flexibility earned respect, but in the Ardennes, speed and audacity were king. Patton and Truscott had become the embodiment of a new kind of warfare, one that combined human decision-making with operational agility, amplified by American industrial power. By mid-December, the German offensive was faltering. Despite initial successes in surprise and terrain advantage, the rapid redeployment of Patton's Third Army and the relentless pressure from Bradley and Hodges were turning the tide. German commanders had calculated for weeks of delay. Instead, they faced an army moving faster than expected, striking where they felt safe and relentlessly applying pressure. The psychological impact was devastating. Officers accustomed to controlling the tempo of battle were now reacting to a reality they could not influence. Hitler, isolated in his bunker, could only watch as his plan unraveled. Von Manteuffel, Model, and Rundstedt, once humiliated by political thugs, were now forced to face the consequences of underestimating the Americans. Their meticulous preparations, predicated on outdated assumptions, collapsed under the weight of operational brilliance. Patton's Third Army, with Truscott as his tactical counterpart, had not only saved the day, they had redefined it. The Battle of the Bulge revealed a clear hierarchy of fear among the German generals. Mark Clark remained a predictable threat, dangerous through vanity, but ultimately exploitable. Montgomery, methodical and cautious, could be outmaneuvered with speed and aggression. Eisenhower, brilliant at coalition management but politically cautious, was respected yet underestimated as a threat. Bradley and Hodges embodied relentless pressure, grinding German forces without the need for brilliance. Alexander earned professional admiration for his adaptability. Truscott commanded fear through tactical unpredictability and operational skill. And Patton? Patton became the standard against which all fear was measured. Bold, decisive, operationally creative, he instilled both terror and awe. In the months following the Ardennes, post-war interrogations and historical analysis confirmed these assessments. German generals ranked their adversaries not by popularity or glory, but by the visceral threat they presented. Speed killed, aggression killed, predictability saved lives. The Third Army and Sixth Corps, though separated by scale, represented this principle in action. Patton's audacity, Truscott's tactical discipline, and the relentless machinery of the American industrial system had created a perfect storm the Germans could not contain. The lessons extend beyond battlefield tactics. For the German High Command, the experience revealed the limits of traditional military doctrine. Prussian discipline, methodical planning, and linear thinking could no longer guarantee survival. Against a coalition of speed, mobility, and industrial might, assumptions about enemy behavior became dangerous liabilities. Patton and Truscott showed that operational flexibility, decisiveness, and the human capacity to adapt quickly were as lethal as tanks, artillery, and infantry. For viewers of WW2 Silent Valor, the RT takeaway is both fascinating and humbling. War is not won by personality alone, nor by numbers or technology in isolation. It is won by the combination of speed, initiative, and operational brilliance. Patton and Truscott redefined what it meant to command, showing that audacity and relentless execution could disrupt even the most prepared and experienced enemy. They proved that fear is not born of reputation alone, but of results, the tangible evidence of unstoppable force and strategic insight. By the end of December 1944, the Ardennes offensive had collapsed. German forces were forced to retreat, their plans in ruins, their officers disoriented and demoralized. The Third Army's rapid response, combined with the systematic pressure from other Allied armies, had turned a potential catastrophe into a decisive demonstration of operational mastery. Patton's audacity and Truscott's tactical precision became legendary, not merely in American history, but in the reports and testimonies of the generals who had faced them and lived to tell the story. This is why, for those studying history, strategy, or human decision-making, the events of the Battle of the Bulge remain endlessly instructive. The Germans respected Alexander for his flexibility, feared Truscott for his precision, and revered and feared Patton for his audacity. The Third Army's maneuvers were not just military operations, they were lessons in leadership, initiative, and the impact of decisiveness on both enemy and ally. As the snow melted and 1945 dawned, the battlefield had changed irreversibly. German generals had learned a lesson in humility, terror, and the inevitability of change. The age of predictable generals, cautious advances, and linear calculations had passed. In its place stood a new paradigm. Speed, initiative, and operational brilliance could reshape the world in a matter of days. Patton, Truscott, Bradley, Hodges, and Alexander demonstrated that leadership could be decisive, terrifying, and transformative, all at once. For those following WW2 Silent Valor, these stories are more than history. They are a window into the minds of those who shaped destiny. If this episode has captivated you, make sure to comment below with your thoughts. Which Allied commander do you think was the most dangerous in reality? Not reputation. Share this video with friends who love history and keep the discussion alive. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of strategy, courage, and audacity that textbooks rarely cover. In the end, the German general's experiences during the Ardennes reveal something profound. Fear is a measure of uncertainty, respect is a measure of skill, and survival belongs to those who can combine audacity with execution. Patton and Truscott exemplified this principle perfectly. The Germans had studied leaders, tactics, and doctrine for decades, but against the velocity of American operational brilliance, they learned that nothing was predictable and no assumption was safe. For viewers of WW2 Silent Valor, let this be the lasting lesson. History remembers the bold, the decisive, and the unstoppable. The Battle of the Bulge is not just a story of soldiers and tanks. It is a story of human ingenuity, relentless drive, and the terrifying power of leaders who refused to be ignored.